The push came from behind, her own sister's hands, 12 marble steps, 12 places broken in the body the king was meant to choose that very night. Elowen lay bleeding at the bottom of the staircase, while Drusilla smoothed her silk and stepped over her. "Now," she whispered, "he is mine." But when the king arrived and the whole ballroom held its breath, he did not look once at the sister still standing. He walked past the music, past the curtsies, past the perfect untouched girl in the center of the room, and he knelt in the blood. Why did he choose the ruined one? What had he seen in her long before tonight that no one else had ever bothered to see? And what had Drusilla just set in motion that she would not live long enough to take back? If your heart just jumped, good. That means you'll want Chapter 1. Subscribe right now and don't look away, because the real reckoning hasn't even started yet. 3 months before solstice, Elowen Trevon was on her knees in the kitchen garden, pulling carrots in a dress that had been turned twice and let down once and was still too short at the wrist. This was her ordinary life, and she had stopped being sorry for it some time ago. The Trevethan name was old and proud and entirely out of money, the kind of poverty that wore good lace and counted candles, and Elowen at 20 had learned every trick of it. She knew how to make a goose last a week. She knew which neighbours would lend a carriage and which would only lend pity. She knew that the rose garden was kept beautiful at the front of the house, because that was the part visitors saw, and that behind the hedge the kitchen garden was her kingdom, and her shame, and her one quiet pleasure. "You will ruin your hands," Drusilla said from the gravel path. Elowen did not look up. Her sister had been saying she would ruin her hands since they were both small girls, and Elowen's hands had not ruined yet. And she suspected Drusilla minded that more than the ruining itself. "Someone has to pull them," Elowen said. "Cook is laid up and Bessie has the children. Send for a girl from the village." With what money, Drusilla did not answer that. Money was a subject the family agreed by an unspoken treaty not to look at too directly. Their father, Sir Aidan Trevethan, gout in both knees, and a stubbornness that had outlasted 3 physicians, would sooner have died than admit how thin the household had grown. Their mother had died long ago of a fever, and Elowen sometimes thought of being married to her father. There were only the 2 of them left now, and they were as unlike as 2 sisters from one mother could be. Drusilla was the beauty. Everyone said so. Pale gold hair like something painted, a small, careful mouth, the kind of laugh that made men lean forward in their chairs. She had been brought out at 17 and had been brought out in a sense ever since, 3 full seasons in borrowed gowns at borrowed houses, and somehow no proposal had ever quite come. Elowen had never asked her sister why. She suspected the why was the same thing that made Drusilla's laugh so careful. A coldness that men could feel before they could name, and that turned them away in the end without their understanding what had turned them. Elowen was the other one. Dark hair that refused to keep its pins. Freckles across her nose that her sister had been trying to bleach off her since they were 12. And a habit of laughing too loudly when something was actually funny. She had not been brought out at all. There had been no money for a season the year she turned 18, and by the next year their father's pride had decided that bringing out 2 daughters was vulgar. And so Elowen had stayed home and pulled carrots and read whatever books had not yet been sold, and told herself that the not minding she felt was real and not a thing she had taught herself. "Father had a letter," Drusilla said, after a silence. Elowen sat back on her heels. Letters at the Trevethan house were rare and rarely good. From whom? From the palace. The word fell into the kitchen garden like a stone into still water, and the ripples reached every corner of Elowen's careful small life before she had even drawn breath. What did it say? It said the king is touring the western counties this autumn. It said he will lodge for a fortnight at Lord Kansu's, and there will be a ball, and every family of name within 40 miles is invited. Drusilla's voice had gone very even. It said the Trevethans are expected to attend. Elowen stared at her. We cannot afford a ball at Kansu's. We cannot afford the carriage there. Father has written to Aunt Morwenna. She will send gowns. 2 gowns. Drusilla's careful mouth tightened. He has told her to send 2. So that was why she stood on the gravel path, looking as though she had swallowed something sour. Drusilla had reigned alone over what little finery the family could scrape together for 3 years. The idea of a second gown in the house, the idea of a sister beside her in a ballroom that mattered, was not a thing she had been raised to share. You must not look at me like that, Drew. Elowen got to her feet, brushing soil from her skirt. I do not want it. I shall make myself useful in a corner and watch you do the dancing. You know I will. It is not what you want that I am thinking of. What then? But Drusilla did not say. She turned and went back up the gravel path toward the house, and Elowen stood there with carrots in her apron, and a feeling she could not quite place. This feeling of a door somewhere having opened that she had not asked to be opened. She did not know yet that the letter mentioned her by name. She did not know that the king himself had written a line in his own hand at the bottom of it, a single small civility about the elder Trevethan girl being remembered to him. She did not know because their father had not shown that part to Drusilla, and Drusilla had not shown that part to her. And the air in the Trevethan house was already thickening with the small particular dishonesties that come before a real cruelty. Elowen would learn later, of course. She would learn far too late. For now she only stood in the garden with her hands full of green tops, and her heart doing a small uncertain thing it had not done in a long while. Because somewhere underneath the everyday, underneath the carrots and the turned dresses and the careful counting of candles, there was a memory she had not let herself touch in 5 years, a memory of a quiet afternoon when she had been 15, and a boy of perhaps 18 had ridden into their lane with a lame horse and asked very politely for water. He had stayed an hour while the horse drank and rested. He had sat on the kitchen step and eaten the bread she brought him without a single airy word about its plainness. He had told her his name was Edric, and he had asked her about the herbs in the garden as though they mattered. And when his horse was sound, he had ridden away, and Elowen had thought in the small private way of 15-year-old girls that he had been the kindest stranger she had ever met. She had not known he was the king's son. She had not known anyone's son. He had not said. She had only learned, a year afterward, that the boy who would be king was named Edric. And she had told herself it was certainly someone else because the kind of things she dreamed in the dark belonged to other girls in other houses. And Elowen Trevethan was sensible. She walked up the gravel path with her apron full of green, and inside the house she could already hear her sister's voice, low and quick, speaking to their father behind a closed door. She could not make out the words. She did not need to. She had lived 20 years in this house, and she knew the particular sound of Drusilla beginning to plan something. What had Drusilla begun to plan in their father's study? What did the king remember of a girl with soil on her hands and bread on a kitchen step? And what would a sister do in a house full of small dishonesties when she discovered her name had been written in a king's own hand? Chapter 1 closes here. Chapter 2 opens with a borrowed gown and a carriage, and the first crack in the careful silence between two sisters. Subscribe now and meet me there. The trunk from Aunt Morwenna arrived on a wet Tuesday, and Drusilla insisted on opening it alone. Elowen heard her sister moving about upstairs for the better part of an hour, the soft rustle of paper, the small dry sound of silk being lifted. When at last she was called up, Drusilla had laid both gowns out on the bed, and Elowen understood the hour at once. The first gown was a pale rose, beautifully cut, almost new. The second was an older thing, in a dull cream that Elowen recognized from a portrait of their aunt at 20. "This one is yours," Drusilla said, smooth as water, indicating the cream. "Aunt thought it would suit your colouring." Elowen looked at the gowns. She had spent her life reading the small signals of her sister's voice, and she heard the lie sitting underneath this one without effort. She did not say so. She had also spent her life knowing when speaking made a thing worse. "It is kind of her," Elowen said. "Either will do. The rose was meant for me. Aunt wrote it on the note. Then the cream is mine." Drusilla had been braced for an argument. Not getting one made her, briefly, uncertain. She recovered and turned away and folded the note into her sleeve before Elowen could ask to see it. Elowen carried the cream gown to her own room and laid it across the chair and stood looking at it a long while. Then she went down to the study because she had remembered something, a small thing, and her hands had begun to feel cold. Her father was not in the study. The letter from the palace lay on his desk, opened, the wax broken. Elowen had been raised never to read another's correspondence, and she stood with her fingers on the edge of the desk for a long moment, and then she lifted the page because some things matter more than the way one was raised. She read it twice. The official invitation was as Drusilla had said. Below it, in a different hand, smaller and quieter, were 3 lines that did not belong to any clerk. "Sir Iden, I trust you are well. Pray remember me to your elder daughter, who once gave war to a stranger and his horse, and asked no payment for it. I have not forgotten the kindness, nor the herb garden." Edric R. Elowen set the letter down very carefully, as though it might break, or as though she might. She did not feel triumph. She felt frightened. She felt the floor under her shift in a small way that meant the room she had lived in all her life was not the room she had thought. Drusilla had read this. Drusilla had read this and chosen not to tell her, and had given her the older gown, and had spoken of the matter all afternoon, as though there were no name written at the bottom in a king's own hand. The study door opened behind her. Drusilla stood in it with the rose gown over her arm, and her face when she saw the letter in Elowen's hand was not surprised. It was something worse. It was the face of a woman who had been expecting this scene and had rehearsed it and was almost relieved to begin. "So you know," Drusilla said. "I know. And what will you do, Elowen?" Drusilla closed the study door behind her. "Tell father you mean to wear the rose. Tell Aunt Morwenna she made a mistake. Tell the king when we arrive at Carnsous that you are the elder Trevethan girl and not me. I will tell the truth, Drew. I will not lie about who I am. You have lied about who you are every day of your life." Drusilla's voice was low and even and not entirely steady. "You have played the patient one, the gardening one, the sister who does not mind. You did mind. You minded every gown of mine, every season, every name on every card. And now a king writes you 3 lines, and you would have me believe you only ever wanted carrots. I did not know about the lines until this hour, but you wanted them. Some part of you wanted them. Do not pretend with me. I am the only person in the world who has watched you closely enough to know. Elowen put the letter down on the desk and faced her sister, and she felt something old and patient finally break in her chest. Yes, she said quietly, I wanted them. I have wanted Drew. I have wanted for years, and I folded it small because there was no room in this house for 2 of us to want anything, and you needed the room more. I gave it to you. I am done giving it. I will wear the cream gown. I will not lie about my name, and if the king remembers me, I will let him. Drusilla went very white. Then you understand, she said, that we are no longer sisters in the way we were this morning. I understand. Drusilla turned and went out, and the rose gown trailed behind her, and Elowen stood alone in her father's study, with 3 lines of a king's handwriting, and the certainty, sudden and cold, that her sister was capable of something she had not yet named. What had Drusilla decided in the moment Elowen refused to step aside? How far would a woman go who had been raised to believe her sister's want was the threat to her own? And what was waiting for Elowen on a marble staircase that neither of them had yet climbed? The carriage to Lord Carnsew's left the Trevethan house on a bright cold morning, and the 3 of them inside it did not speak for the first hour of the drive. Sir Iden sat in the corner with his gouty leg propped on a cushion, watching the hedgerows go by with the closed face of a man who knew his daughters were at war and had decided, in the way of fathers like him, that the war was not his to settle. Drusilla sat opposite, the rose gown folded carefully in the box at her feet, her hands quiet in her lap, her eyes on the window. She had been quiet since the study. Quiet was not the same thing as calm, and Elowen had grown up enough in her sister's company to know the difference. Elowen sat beside her father in the cream gown packed in its own modest box, and she watched her sister's profile and she thought, I have lost her. I lost her in the study, and I did not feel it then because I was angry. And now I am not angry, and I feel it. It was a strange grief. It did not feel like a death. It felt like a door she had been leaning against her whole life, and had only just discovered was not a door at all but a painted wall, and behind the painting there had been no room, and there had never been. You will not embarrass me, Elowen, her father said suddenly, without turning from the window. No, father, you will dance if you are asked. You will not laugh too loudly. You will not speak of the herb garden. No, father. That was the whole of it, the small inheritance of advice he had to give her on the morning of her first ball, and Elowen received it the way she received everything from him, with a nod and a folded face, and underneath the folding she thought, Edric remembered the herb garden. He wrote of it in his own hand, and I will speak of it if he asks me, because lying about who I am has cost too much already. They arrived at Carnsew's in the late afternoon, and Carnsew's was a house that made the Trevethan house look like a cottage. Long sweeping drive, 2 footmen at the door, lamps already lit against the early autumn dark. Elowen climbed down from the carriage in her travelling cloak and a sensible bonnet, and felt every inch the country relation she was, and she made herself walk in beside her sister without flinching, because flinching now would be the start of a long evening of it. There were other girls, of course there were. Elowen had known there would be, but knowing and seeing were not the same. The drawing room before dinner held perhaps 15 young women in beautiful gowns, with mothers and aunts arrayed behind them like ships at anchor. And every one of them was here because the king was here, and every one of them knew it, and the air was thick with the small bright violence of women who had been told their value lay entirely in being chosen. A tall girl in a peach gown turned to look at Elowen and Drusilla as they entered, and Elowen recognized her at once as someone who would be either an ally or a problem, and she did not yet know which. The girl crossed the room directly. Trevethan, yes. The younger one I have seen at Bath. You must be the elder. She had a frank face and slightly crooked teeth, and she did not curtsy. I am Tamsin Bly. My mother is the one in the awful turban over there. Do not look directly, she can feel it. Are you frightened? I am frightened. They have put 15 of us in one house, and we are all to compete for one man's eye, and it is exactly as horrid as I thought it would be. Elowen, before she could stop herself, laughed. It was the wrong laugh, too loud, the very laugh her father had warned her against an hour ago in the carriage, and 3 heads turned, and Drusilla went still beside her. But Tamsin Bly grinned, full and crooked, and Elowen understood with a small lifting of the heart that she had just made the first friend of her grown life. I am terribly frightened, Elowen said honestly. I have never been to a thing like this. I have only been pulled out of a kitchen garden and put into a carriage. Then we shall be frightened together. Come, I will tell you who everyone is, so that you may be frightened more efficiently. Tamsin drew her away, and Elowen, glancing back, saw her sister's face for one bare instant before Drusilla composed it, and what she saw there she did not have a name for. It was not anger, it was not even jealousy, not quite. It was a sort of calculation, the look of a woman watching a piece on a board move to a square she had not planned for, and beginning swiftly to plan again. The next 2 days were a blur of strangers and small rooms and the particular exhaustion of being looked at. Elowen had spent her life being unseen, and being seen took muscles she did not know she had. She walked in the gardens with Tamsin. She sat at meals beside an elderly aunt of Lord Carnsew's, who was deaf in one ear and could be made to laugh by anyone willing to lean toward the other one. She did not see the king. He was at Carnsew's, somewhere, in some wing of it, occupied with men in dark coats and matters Elowen could not have named, and the ball at which he would appear was set for the 3rd night. Drusilla was perfect during those 2 days. That was the only word for it. She was charming at meals and graceful in the gardens and gentle with the deaf aunt and warm toward Tamsin Bly, and Elowen watched her sister be perfect and felt the cold of it grow. On the 2nd afternoon, in a quiet moment in the long gallery, Drusilla found her alone. I have been thinking, Drusilla said. I was unkind to you in the study. I was frightened, Elowen. I have been frightened for 3 years. Every season has cost father money he did not have, and every season has ended with me unmarried, and I thought when this letter came that here at last was a chance to make it good. I did not think of you. I should have. I am sorry. She said it well. She had always been able to say things well. And Elowen, who had loved her sister all her life, felt the old wanting rise in her chest, the wanting to be told this and to believe it, the wanting of the door that had been a painted wall. Drew, she said, I do not need to be the one he chooses. I never needed it. I only could not lie about who I was. I know that now. I know. Drusilla took her hand, and her hand was cold, and Elowen tried not to notice. Will you come down with me tomorrow night? Together. As sisters. Whatever happens, whatever he decides, let us at least walk into the ballroom together. I do not want to walk in alone, Elowen. I am not so brave as you. It was the brave that did it. Drusilla had never in her life called Elowen brave, and Elowen heard the wrongness of it and chose, in that moment, not to hear. She wanted her sister back. She had not known how much until the offer was held out, and the wanting was so large that it drowned the small, clear voice in her chest that said, "She is calling you brave because she is preparing you for something." "Yes," Elowen said, "we will walk in together." That night she could not sleep. Tamsin came to her room in a wrapper and sat at the foot of the bed and looked at her with the frank face. "You are different tonight. My sister apologized to me." Tamsin considered the canopy, "And you believed her." "She is my sister Tamsin. I have 3 sisters, Elowen. The one who loves me would never apologize like that. She would apologize badly and stammer and say the wrong thing, and we would both cry. A good clean apology, in my experience, is the thing a woman gives you just before she does the next thing." Tamsin met her eye. "I am not telling you not to believe her. I am telling you to keep your eyes open on the stairs tomorrow." On the stairs. At Kansu's. The ballroom is on the ground floor and the ladies' rooms are above it, and the only way down is the great marble staircase. And tomorrow night every girl in this house will descend it in turn, and the king will be at the bottom. It is a piece of theatre Lord Kansu is rather famous for. I only mention the stairs because they are very steep and very polished, and a woman in a long gown is not steady on them at the best of times. She held Elowen's gaze a moment longer. "Keep your eyes open." Elowen lay awake a long time after Tamsin left. She thought about the herb garden. She thought about a boy of 18 on a kitchen step, eating bread, asking about the rosemary. She thought about 3 lines in a king's own hand. She thought about her sister's cold hand and the word brave, and the way Drusilla had said together, and the long polished marble of a staircase she had not yet climbed. She thought, "I will go down those stairs tomorrow night, and I will go down them beside her, because if I do not, then I have given up on her, and I am not yet ready to give up on her. But I will hold the banister." In the morning, Elowen took the cream gown from its box and shook it out. It was older than she was, and the lace at the cuffs was a little yellowed, and she did not mind. She thought, "This is the gown I will be remembered in, one way or another," and she was surprised to find the thought did not frighten her. What had Drusilla truly been planning during her 2 days of perfect smiles? What was Tamsin Bly keeping back when she said to keep her eyes open? And what would happen on a polished marble staircase with a king waiting at the bottom of it, and a sister at Elowen's elbow whose apology had come too clean and too soon? The 3rd night came in the way important nights do, all at once and then very slowly. Elowen dressed in the cream gown by lamplight, with a maid she did not know fixing her hair, and she watched her own face in the glass and thought, "That woman is going down a staircase tonight, and I do not yet know who she will be at the bottom of it." The lace at her cuffs was a little yellowed, and she did not mind. Tamsin had come in earlier with a small string of seed pearls borrowed from her mother's awful turban, and had pinned them into Elowen's dark hair herself, and had said, "Frank as ever, you look like a woman about to be remembered," and Elowen had not known how to answer that, and had only kissed her friend's cheek. Drusilla came to the door when the maid was done. She wore the rose gown. She looked, Elowen had to admit, very beautiful, and there was a small, tight smile on her sister's mouth that did not quite reach her eyes. "Sister," she said, "are you ready? I am. Then take my arm. Drusilla offered it, the inside of her elbow. Very correct, very together. Together, you said, we promised. Elowen looked at the offered arm. She heard Tamsin in her head, the clean apology and the next thing. She heard her father saying she would not embarrass him. She heard, underneath all of it, her own voice from the study. Quiet and certain, I will not lie about who I am. She did not take Drusilla's arm. I will walk down side you, Drew, she said gently. But I will hold the banister. Drusilla's smile thinned. It is meant to be linked. It is the picture of it. Two sisters arm in arm at the top of the stairs. I know what it is meant to be. I am holding the banister. For one moment, in the corridor outside Elowen's room, the truth between them surfaced and was visible, and they both saw it, the small, ugly truth that had been swimming under everything since the study. Drusilla had wanted her on her arm so that no banister would catch her. Elowen had known it. Drusilla saw that Elowen had known it. Neither of them said a word. Very well, Drusilla said, light as anything. The banister then. They walked together to the head of the great marble staircase. The hall at Kansu's was a vast pale shell of a thing. The staircase descending in a long curving sweep. Marble veined with grey, 12 steps to a wide landing and 12 more from the landing to the floor below, and the floor below was full. Elowen had not let herself think about how full. Every guest in the house and half the county besides. In their best, in candlelight, the music already begun, the king somewhere among them, though she could not see him from above, and the names of the young ladies being called in turn by a man in livery, one by one, to descend. Miss Bligh. Tamsin went with the awful turban behind her. Her crooked grin flashed up at Elowen as she passed, and Elowen watched her friend walk down those polished steps in a peach gown and not slips, and breathed and thought, I will not slip either. 2 more names. Then the Mrs. Treversthan. Drusilla stepped forward first, and Elowen with her, half a pace behind, and the moment her own foot touched the top step, Elowen put her right hand firmly on the marble banister and kept it there. The first step, the second, the third. She heard music. She heard the small surf of conversation from the floor below, the way 100 whispered voices made a sound like the sea. She did not look down. She looked at her feet, and at the next step, and at the small distance, her hand had to slide along the cold marble as she went. Halfway to the landing, Drusilla, on her left, made a small soft sound, the sort a person makes when she has tripped on her own hem and recovered. Elowen looked up. The look on her sister's face was not the look of a woman who had tripped. Drusilla's body had turned slightly. Her shoulder had come around. Her hand, which had been at her own side a step before, was lifted now, not gracefully, not as part of a step, but lifted with purpose, palm flat, and her eyes were on the small place between Elowen's shoulder blades where a flat palm could push and butts. And her face was the face Elowen had seen for one bare instant in the drawing room, and not been able to name, and now she had the name for it. It was the face of a woman who had been raised to believe her sister's want was the threat to her own, and who had decided, in the long, slow boil of 3 perfect days, that the threat must be removed. Elowen had time in that singles-hung second for one clear thought. I am not letting go of the banister. The push came. It was not a hard push. It did not need to be. Drusilla had chosen the place and the moment well, and a woman in a long gown on polished marble does not need much to go. Elowen felt her sister's palm strike the small flat place between her shoulders, and she felt her left foot leave the step, and she felt her body begin to pitch forward into nothing, and her right hand on the banister closed. It closed with everything she had. She did not fall the way Drusilla had planned. She did not pitch headlong down 12 steps with her arms loose at her sides. She fell, but she fell sideways, twisted by the grip of her own hand on the cold marble, her right arm wrenching in its socket as her body's weight came onto it, her shoulder striking the banister. Then the steps, her hip, her ribs, and she went down the rest of the way in a long bruising slide with her right hand still clamped to the marble like the hand of a drowning woman on a rope. She did not let go until the landing. She heard distantly somebody scream. She heard the music stop. She heard her sister's voice above her, high and clean and shocked. Oh God, Elowen. Oh, my poor sister. And she heard, underneath the words, the small note of a woman who had not got quite what she wanted and was already beginning to plan the next version of it. Elowen lay on the landing on her side. Her right shoulder was wrong. Her right wrist was wrong. Her hip and her ribs sang one long bright song of pain, and her mouth tasted of blood from where she had bitten her own tongue, and her cream gown was torn at the knee and the elbow, and the seed pearls Tamsin had pinned into her hair were scattered down the marble behind her like a small sad necklace come undone. She did not faint. She wanted to. She would not let herself, because the whole hall was looking up at her. 100 faces, candlelight, the music silent. And at the foot of the second flight, at the bottom of the staircase, where she had been meant to land beautifully and be presented to him, stood the king. She knew him at once. 5 years older than the boy on the kitchen step, broader in the shoulder. A small scar above his eyebrow that had not been there at 15, but the same quiet face, the same dark eyes, and the eyes were on her, and the eyes were not on her sister, and the eyes had a great and terrible stillness in them that Elowen, lying on cold marble with her shoulder out of place, recognized at once because she had felt it herself a moment ago at the top of the stair. It was the stillness of a person who has just seen with absolute clarity the worst thing in the room. He moved. He did not run. Kings, perhaps, are not allowed to run. He walked, and he walked very quickly, and he came up the lower flight 2 steps at a time, and the crowd parted for him without his asking, and he reached the landing where Elowen lay, and he did not look at Drusilla, who was standing 3 steps above, with both hands pressed to her mouth in a perfect picture of sisterly horror. He knelt down beside Elowen on the cold marble, in his good coat, in front of every soul in that house. Miss Treverton, he said quietly. He did not touch her yet. He waited. May I help you? Her eyes filled. She had held everything else, the fall, the pain, the not fainting, but the courtesy of the asking before the touching undid her where the marble had not. Yes, she whispered. Please. He took off his coat. He laid it over her very gently, the way one covers a thing that matters. He put one arm beneath her shoulders and the other beneath her knees, and he lifted her. And Elowen heard the indrawn breath of 100 people at once, the small collective gasp of a county, discovering that its king had just picked up a bleeding girl in a torn cream gown in front of them. He carried her down the rest of the marble staircase himself. He did not give her to a footman. He did not call for a physician from the floor. He carried her, and he passed Drusilla on the way. And he did not look at her, and Elowen, half conscious in his arms, saw her sister's face as they went by, and the face was no longer pretending horror. The face was beginning very faintly to understand what she had done. What did the king say to Drusilla in the small private room he carried Elowen to? What did Tamsin Bly see from the foot of the stairs that no one else in the hall thought to notice? And what does a woman do, with her shoulder out of place, and her sister ruined, and a king's coat over her, when she realizes that the choice he is about to make is not the one anyone in that house was prepared for? The room he carried her to was a small library off the hall, and he laid her down on a settee with a care that did not match the speed of his walking, and then he turned and shut the door himself before any servant could. He knelt by the settee. He did not call yet for the physician, though Elowen could hear feet running for one in the hall outside. He looked at her face, only her face, and his own had gone almost grey under the candlelight, and she understood, in that hung quiet moment, that the still terrible look she had seen on him at the foot of the stairs had not been royal at all. It had been simply the face of a man who had watched, from the wrong angle, a thing he had no power to stop. "I saw the push," he said. Her eyes filled again. She had not been certain anyone had. Drusilla had stood a step above and slightly behind. From the floor, with the light where it was, almost no one in that hall could have seen the angle of her sister's hand. But the king had been looking up. The king had been looking, Elowen understood now, since the moment the names of the Trevethan sisters had been called. "I know," she whispered. "You held the banister. Tamsin told me to." He let out a small breath that was almost, but not quite, a laugh. The kind a person makes when a thing has only just barely not been the worst thing. "Then I owe Miss Bligh a debt I shall not soon repay." The physician came. The next hour was not gentle. Her shoulder was put back into its socket, and Elowen, who had decided on the staircase that she would not faint, fainted then, briefly, from the white pain of it, and woke to find the king still in the room, in his shirt sleeves, his coat still over her, his back turned to give her decency while the physician bound her wrist and her ribs. When the physician was finished and gone, Edric turned back, and he sat on the small chair near her head. And he did not take her hand because she was injured and they were not yet anything. And Elowen loved him a little in that moment for the not taking. "There will be an inquiry," he said quietly. "Your sister will be questioned. I will not pretend to you, Miss Trevethan, that the law moves quickly in a matter like this, or kindly toward the testimony of one woman against another in her own family. But I saw the push, and Miss Bligh, I am told, saw it from below. Lord Carnsue has already spoken to me. He saw it from the gallery. There were 3 witnesses besides the one lying on this settee, and that is enough. What will happen to her? That is not for me to decide. She will be sent from this house tonight. She will go home to your father under escort. Beyond that, the matter is the magistrate's. I would not lie to you about it. She may be charged, she may not. But she will not stand again in any ballroom in this country. That much I can promise." Elowen closed her eyes. She did not weep. The grief she felt was older than tonight. It was the grief of a door that had been a painted wall, and the painting was finished now, and she could see at last the bare stone underneath. "I asked her," she said. "I asked her to walk down with me. She offered me her arm. I almost took it. You did not take it." "No. Then you saved your own life, Miss Trevethan, with one small refusal at the top of a stair and a hand on a banister. I would have you remember that. Not the push, the refusal." She opened her eyes. He was very near. The candlelight was soft on the small scar above his eyebrow that had not been there at 15. "You remembered the herb garden," she said. "I have remembered the herb garden for 5 years. I am the elder Trevethan, Edric. I am 20. I have pulled carrots all my life and turned the same 3 dresses, and I do not know how to be a queen. And tonight my own sister tried to kill me on a marble staircase. I am not a romantic match. You gave water to a stranger and asked no payment for it, he said simply. You held a banister when your sister told you not to. You are the only romantic match I have ever wanted, and I have been waiting 5 years to be allowed to say it. Marry me, Elowen. Not tonight, not next month, when your shoulder is healed and your house is quiet. But say yes now, so that I may stop pretending it has been anything else. She laughed, and the laugh caught on her bruised ribs and turned half into a sob, and he heard the catch, and his eyes went tight with it, and Elowen reached up with her good hand and touched the scar above his eyebrow, the small new mark of the 5 years between 15 and 20. Yes, she said. Yes, Edric. He pressed his forehead very gently to hers. He did not kiss her. She was bandaged and on a settee, and the door of the library was about to open, and he was a king, and there would be time. They had both at last learned that there would be time. Drusilla was gone from the house before dawn. She did not see Elowen again that night. The months that followed were not all easy. The inquiry came. Drusilla was sent in the end to a small property in the north of the country, neither charged nor pardoned, the kind of quiet ruin that a great family arranges when the law cannot quite reach. Sir Aidan Treverton never recovered his temper or his health, and he died the following winter without having spoken of the staircase once. And Elowen, who had not been able to forgive her sister, found she could at least pity her father. And that was enough for a daughter to manage. Her shoulder healed slowly. There was a stiffness in her right wrist that never quite went away, and on cold mornings she felt the staircase in her hip. She did not mind. The body, she came to understand, remembered what the mind tried to set aside, and the remembering was not always cruel. Some mornings the ache in her wrist felt almost like company, a small steady voice that said, "You held on, you held on." She married the king in the spring, in a small ceremony, with Tamsin Bly as her witness and the awful turban in the front row. She wore cream, and the lace at her cuffs was a little yellowed, and she did not mind. She kept an herb garden behind the palace against all advice. The gardeners protested. She planted it anyway with her own hands on a bright cold morning. Edric brought her water in a tin cup at noon and sat on the kitchen step beside her, and she fed him bread, and they did not speak for a long while, and the not speaking was the warmest thing she had known. Somewhere in the north, a sister sat alone with a lesson she had never been able to learn. And Elowen thought of her sometimes on the coldest mornings, and felt the old ache in her wrist, and was sorry, and was not sorry, and was both at once, in the way a person can be when the loss is real and the refusing was right. The painted wall was a wall. There had never been a room behind it, but Elowen had built a room of her own, with her own hands, out of carrots and herbs and a king's coat, and the small refusal at the top of a marble stair, and the door of it stood open to anyone who came to it cold or hungry, and the candles were not counted any more.